talking about it, giving the vision, and pushing so that we accelerate the mushrooming of some of these early companies. Obviously, when these companies become successful, they recruit more people, and then more and more future talents will find it extremely worthwhile to choose semiconductor design as a career. And that's how I think we will be able to position ourselves as a global player in semiconductor in the future.
Winning in martial arts and investments require the same skill. Both need preparation, flexibility, hard work, and sound judgment, which is no different from our philosophy at Grand Pine Capital. Because when preparation, action, and opportunities meet, it creates the perfect formula for success. A formula to make your money work hard for you. We are Grand Pine Capital.
I'm not. And I'm not saying that it's easy. In the same way that when Quark started, it wasn't easy to be an international trader. You have to go to London here and try to get all this, negotiate with the big boys. In the same way now, it's not going to be easy. But the good thing is government has a clear vision. Government will provide the policy support. We are putting everything in place, and that should lower down the risk for Malaysian new players. So I'm hoping that 10 years down the line, yes, we will be able to basically design, not just manufacture, design and manufacture and ship our own chips, not just for the data center, but for everything else. Why the data center provides this window of opportunity? Because of the focus on Malaysia. Suddenly, and this is the bit that I think I hope we will be able to bring more awareness to Malaysian population. The whole world sees the potential of Malaysia. That this is a country that is still relatively cheaper in terms of cost and everything, have very decent foundation for training and capability. It might not go all the way up, but we are a lot better than most other countries. We already have a very good base of semiconductor industry from 1972 onwards, albeit it's just packaging and testing, but we know semiconductors. We have regulation about semiconductors. And most importantly, this is a neutral country that is navigating as best as we can between the geopolitical tensions, and we sit at the center of a market that is going to be the third or fourth largest in 10 years' time. International investors are seeing at Malaysia and say, if I need to take a bet on semiconductor and chips, this is the place. Of course, and that's why if we are able to share that vision and ambition and run as fast and begin taking positions in this value chain, when international investors see value in the future, they will put their money. And therefore, we will be able to mobilize capital better into startups or even large companies that are now pivoting into semiconductor. It's not going to happen overnight. But this window of data center coming into Malaysia is not going to last long. If we compete purely on cheaper industrial land and construction, it wouldn't be long before someone else say, look, we can offer cheaper. And that's why it's very important to use this window as a first mover's advantage and very quickly scale up. And that's the bit where government has to play our role in order to bridge the structural weaknesses that we have. And if we can get more Malaysians to be very ambitious and wants to go into it, then I think it will create an ecosystem that can widen our lead compared to other competitors in this region. So that's basically the ambition that we have.
Yeah, there's definitely nice ambitions, and is it possible many young men doesn't feel that this is relevant to them? It is still feel that this is irrelevant because most of our semiconductor, our technology is also for export.
Yeah.
They are still very convenient to all these service sector.
Yeah.
We always say a lot of young entrepreneurs with a lot of SME in Malaysia, but they are like more Me Too concept. Always copy, like that.
Yeah.
So how do we try to wake up them and give them awareness on to this industry?
I think it's given in any society, and that's where economic leadership from the government is very important. Let's rewind to 1970s.
Okay.
Were you born in 1970s?
I haven't.
You were not.
1970s.
Yeah, all right, 1970s, right. Imagine this. Imagine we have this conversation in 1977, the year I was born, right? And then we tell the Malaysian public then that we are going to be a major oil and gas player, and then we will be able to do what ExxonMobil and Shell does. We will go offshore and put all our platforms and then drill all the way. How do you think population then thinks? So obviously they say, I can't relate to it. We're still a farmer and so on, you know. But with the right combination of policy support, a good business structure, and most importantly, a clear plan in order to scale up. Now, Petronas is the top 10 oil and gas companies in the world. Oil and gas, which in Malaysia, we take it for granted that oil and gas is a high-tech, a very difficult and capital-intensive industry to play with. If you go to other countries and they look at Malaysia, they say that how can we do like Malaysia does with oil and gas? Because it's so difficult. One drill requires 100 million ringgit, which is about $20 million. Where do we get money for something like that? But over the last 50 years, because of the government support and so on, not only that we have Petronas, and Petronas will not be able to be as successful without the downstreaming and building the overall ecosystem of local players and so on. We are where we are now. Of course, it took us, a good 20, 30 years to do that. And we did that progressively over time. The first phase of oil and gas industry in Malaysia was very much dependent on foreign companies. Basically, they did everything. Our guys actually just stay there and learn from them. After about 10 years, we started running things ourselves, although it was built by them and their technology. And then the next phase comes in. When we build everything ourselves, we just license the IP for the chemical process, and it continued to grow. I don't suppose when we talk about semiconductor and coming up with our own design chip, I don't suppose it would happen overnight. But talking about it, giving the vision, and pushing so that we accelerate the mushrooming of some of these early companies. Obviously, when these companies become successful, they recruit more people, and then more and more future talents will find it extremely worthwhile to choose semiconductor design as a career. And that's how I think we will be able to position ourselves as a global player in semiconductor in the future.
This is why you believe that the GPU is not far from now in Malaysia?
I think even the whole definition of GPU will continue to change going forward. It's basically compute power. What is GPU today may not be GPU in the next 10, 20 years, maybe depending on what is the compute power required, right? We call them GPU now because of the complex processing that they do, which is 100 more times faster than a CPU. So I wouldn't get into the nitty-gritty of what is our focus, GPU or CPU.
Okay.
But the core skills of being able to take a blueprint of IC and then design it ourselves for a specific purpose and then sell those chips based on our design to either a manufacturer or it could be a generic chips used in any smart gadgets. We need to cross that line first.
Okay.
Once we cross that line, so most probably I think it's only reasonable that we start with the CPU first, you know, before we start thinking about doing a GPU and so on. But if we can begin supplying our own design chips for smartphones, for automotive, even for laptops, and the industry continues to grow, given the fact that we will have some local demand from our own data center, it makes sense in the future, now that you have that foundational skills, then people go from CPU to GPU. After all, it's not necessarily just a function of technology and so on, it's also a function of cost and so on. So I wouldn't go into the detail about GPU or CPU, but the ability to design and manufacture our own and it becomes a mass product in the world, I think that's the opportunity that we have in the next 5 to 10 years.
We still have to go through the learning process, learning curve, right?
Yeah. Don't ask me. To me, everything is doable. And if you're in my shoes, you know, I think a Minister of Economy needs to have that kind of worldview.
Okay.
You know, if someone in my shoes basically look at a scenario and say that we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do this. I mean,
we have to ambitious.
We won't go anywhere in this world.
Actually, in our YouTube channel comment, a lot of Malaysians are, when we talk about the future, they will always comment like, no hope.
It's like irrelevant.
Is that easy? But I mean, everything starts from the first step. And it's like go back to 3 years ago, the unity government formed. 3 years, right? This is the third year. So the Ministry of Economy has been doing all this economic planning. Then we were talking about the growth, but any besides the growth, how to drive the economic growth up? How about protecting the people? I know there's another plan called the Rakyat's Income Initiative. So why Ministry of Economy will come out with this kind of project?
Well, it's Ministry of Economy has this heavy responsibility since day one to manage inequality in the country. I think if for those who are more familiar with corporate structure, let me give this analogy, right? In a huge corporate structure, you always have the group corporate strategy function. Basically someone who does the planning, who helps with the capital allocation, and then takes a mid-term to long-term view about where the company should go. And in doing so, you have to cut across different functions of a company. You have to look, of course, at the finance, you have to look at the products, you have to look at the market, but you also have to look at the people, because you know, a company cannot grow if you have people who are not happy. So more or less, when you run a government, what I discover is not that much different. There is a parallel to running a huge corporation. So in our government, since day one, you know, of independence, we always have this function of, used to be called Economic Planning Unit, EPU, now it's Kementerian Ekonomi, that does a cross-cutting planning and vision setting for the whole country. And while we focus on growth narrative and economic growth, of course, the ideal situation is that as the country prospers, we notch good growth year after year. The spillover will be translated into good salaries for everyone, and everyone will be happy.
That's what they're looking for. Yeah.
It's happily ever after, right? But it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, we heard about is middle income trap.
Yeah, well, that's slightly different. That's slightly different. That's more on the structure of the economy. What we are doing, and we're talking about semiconductor energy transition, is precisely to provide some pathways for us to migrate from low value, increasingly more competitive cost economic structure to one where the value comes from innovation, from design and so on. Never mind, if we don't have to manufacture it, it's okay, but the brain comes from us. That's more of the restructuring of the economy. But even if we are able to do it perfectly, that Malaysia becomes a high-tech country, right? Inequality will always exist. Okay. Somehow, the way that this new wealth generated will not necessarily filter equally to everyone. You will have groups in our society that are left out. And if we look at some countries in the world now, even though they have been able to grow and prosper over the last 50 years, they are now under pressure from this one issue of inequality. And around inequality will spin off other society's problems. If you look in the West, the opposition towards immigration. So there's, they have this challenge where on the one hand, they need migrants in order to move their economy, but obviously they will also be resistant because locals will feel that you are taking away our jobs. So this, in my view, this all revolves around inequality. And that's why it's very important that as we drive the economy, while the private sector will be able to drive the economy with a good economic construct from the government, the sole responsibility for ensuring that inequality in society doesn't widen, that is the sole responsibility of the government. Therefore, whatever we do, we have to make sure that it is as inclusive as possible. So that's why a lot of our focus as well is on wages, is on giving opportunities for people to at least have an extra income. You mentioned about IPR.
Yeah. What is the government doing now?
You see, we help poor people all the time. But I think the program design has to be correct. What we did differently with IPR.
Not just giving out money.
Not just giving out money, because first, no amount of money will be enough, if you keep on giving.
I think that's right.
Yeah. But most importantly is that we may not necessarily solve a problem, if families after a while become dependent on government handouts because their real need, which is the ability to earn a decent amount of monthly wages. If this is not resolved, then forever the group of people who require government's handouts will continue to grow. So any government in the past in this country has had one way or another some programs to help the B40s, or especially the poor, people who live below poverty line. What we did differently is that we say, okay, this may sound controversial, but it's better to provide the infrastructure and upskilling for them to earn rather than give them a free cash. So instead of giving, say, 700 ringgit per month to a recipient, we say that, look, over 2 years, this is what we're going to do. We'll give you one vending machine where we will position it at a good marketplace, but whether or not you will earn that money depends on how good you are at your skill. And if your skill is preparing food, you make sure that you sell the food properly, make sure it's good quality, is at the right price, because the volume will give you more than that 700 ringgit per month that you otherwise will earn. And from government's perspective, we feel that it is a better program because on one hand, you help, but they have the capacity to earn more, and then you resolve their operational business risks. In the past, we just give them a gerai and say, go and sell something. So they get a gerai. It costs more than 700 ringgit a month. But in the end, they don't even know where to berniaga because everyone has gerai somewhere, right? The other perspective is that those assets can be used for future groups of recipients. Instead of giving 700, 800 per month, and then you have to continuously push up higher budget to give handout into it, and the next batch into it. So our biggest concern before was that it's not easy to change the culture.
It's like producing business owners, producing entrepreneurs.
A small business owner.
Although in the past that has been done, so-called this idea about producing business owners. But the difference was this: you take one poor chap from Keppel, he's struggling, his monthly income maybe 1,500, and then you say, okay, I give you the wok, I give you the stove, I give you a stall, and this is our assistance to you, 20,000 ringgit. So we give, go and do your business. It's actually not easy to start a business because you need to know, whether you can cook well, and more importantly, you need to be placed at the right location for the market. And they have to go and find this location themselves. They don't get license and so on. So eventually, after 2-3 months, they just give up. That investments into the wok, into the stove, into the gerai, the stall actually just burn money, and you don't help them. So what I think we did better with the IPR is that we manage the business risk throughout the chain. They don't have to worry about the market, the location. There's ready buyers there. They don't have to worry about advertisement because that's basically government program. They just need to focus on what they are good at, which is cooking. And then, of course, they have to go through some courses. They need to know basics, finance, basic marketing, and so on. And most importantly is that it has proven to generate more income than previous programs, either direct cash handouts or giving them equipments. Giving equipments alone doesn't work. You have to build the whole business for them.
I mean, you just make the marketplace for them, just like Pasar Malam,
yeah,
right?
just like Pasar Malam.
It's very crowded. You just have a.
They have to compete with 20 others mee goreng seller.
Okay.
So it is happening. Any Malaysian can apply for this.
If they meet the criteria, which is that means that their household income usually is below 3,000 ringgit.
Just now you mentioned the social inequality, and government try to rationalize the subsidy, but from Tauke perspective, they are struggling. All the operational cost is rising. So, is any measure or any policy to hedge the problem?
Again, this what I say may be controversial, but I think it's better. People will relate better if we look at it from their own perspective.
Okay.
So rather than saying the macro policy here and there and so on, let's turn it the other way around.
Okay.
If you run your business, right? and you need to compete.
Okay.
You know? The one thing that I feel will protect any business at whatever level, whatever size, is efficiency.
Okay.
If you are efficient, then you will survive, come what may, the economic cycle and so on. Now, what is exactly efficiency for a business? If I run my business, right? Efficiency is a function of cost. You need to be, you need to have cost advantage, and therefore wastages and so on. The more productive companies are the one that manage the cost better. Number one. Number two is a function of motivation. If you have the right people running your business with the right motivation, therefore they will run the business better, as opposed to a corporation where people basically just punch in and then go back, and then you have this high payroll and very low productivity. Third, efficiency. So these are all efficiency. Cost leadership, people with the right motivation. And third one is basically technology. Your product must have an advantage over its competitors. And if you already maximize your cost, then the only way to be competitive out there is basically to have better products. And better products mean technology, right? Now, when I talk about subsidy retargeting, of course, the immediate
Come to subsidy.
the immediate reaction from everyone and anyone is that why you want to punish us because
They feel
it's
painful.
painful.
you
And then the
better give us
T50
reason.
the T15 will say that wow, I already pay tax, and now I don't get this and so on. Okay, but if you look from macro perspective, in order to make our economy more efficient, because we need to be more efficient in order to compete with the world, first and foremost, we need to manage our cost, And when it comes to cost, even businesses understand that we can't survive if we sell a product below the cost. Whatever we do, we must reflect the cost. And that's the bit that we need to improve in our economy as a country. We need to begin aligning our product, our utilities with the cost. Because what the public doesn't see maybe is this, even businesses, right? If we continue with the blanket subsidy, our society will be used to paying something for half the cost. If the cost for RON 95 is RM2.70, our society wants it to be at RM2. It will have a knock-on effect on everything else, because as businesses, SMEs, you will always be mindful that how do I price this, because it's so price sensitive, the margin is lower, and the moment you play the cost game, you can't focus on the technology game, on better products games, right? So from the macro perspective, over and above this thing about we need to save how much billion and so on, is the reform to our economy so that we are more cost reflective. And if we can do that as a market reform to our economy, that means that businesses will benefit in the long run, because you are able to reflect the cost properly, because our society and market is getting used to it now. What we need to do as a government and as a country is this, we need to strike a balance so that whatever transitioning we do, first help those who are already at the bottom. For example, RM20 additional cost per week for someone like me may not affect my life, but for someone else, it really makes life difficult for them. We have to make sure that whatever saving, whatever money that is directed into more productive economic investments, because in the long run, not just people benefit from higher wages, more employment, but even our businesses benefit from the infrastructure, from the investment, so that they can grow better. And thirdly, we need to make sure that whatever we do is equitable. And that's the long debate in government. How do we do this? But independent of all this, you know, if I wear a pure economist hat, right, I would argue that we need to go through this process because we need to build our competitiveness, and having an economy that reflects cost is any business's demand. Because I wouldn't be able to run my company if I'm expected to sell below the cost. I have to make sure that I get a margin. So a society that doesn't want to reflect cost is going to have an impact on our own competitiveness in the long run. I know that people say, too much argument for me. I just want to make sure that I don't pay much, you know. But as a government, we have to make decisions for the long term. And this is exactly what is happening bits and pieces.
Okay.
Because eventually, I hope, by having a cost-reflective economy, it actually makes us stronger and more competitive, and it will allow the businesses to grow better in the future.
I guess most of I just have a take a wild guess. Most of them are accepted the idea. The only thing they are actually asking for something to balance it. So anything that policy to benefit the on the short term business, that like maybe tax cut kind of thing.
We have clusters of growth engine all over the country at different stage of maturity. Just I don't believe in coming up with infrastructure projects to push the local economy for that particular state or that particular place. But it's completely two different countries. I mean, I have to run two sets of books and everything. It's just the cost and the inefficiency outweighs everything else. That's why managing this require both countries to make a commitment that we will resolve so that everything becomes more efficient. That's the very concept of JSSEZ that didn't exist before, because Iskandar was pretty much our plan, with Singapore supporting it, but all the key things were not necessarily on the table to be discussed.